welcome back to the GCN Racing News Show. Coming up this week, the battle for the maglia rosa is in full flow at the Giro d'Italia. We'll recap and analyse all the action up to the first rest day. There's been plenty of other racing too. We're in Spain for the Itzulia Women's Tour and Hungary for the Tour of Hungary. And we have some contract news to go over as well. That and more on this week's show. This week in the world of racing, we learnt it takes a lot to reel in Mads Pedersen. We also learnt that Alberto Contador still celebrates like no other.
Vais que intenta cogerle la rueda con un sufrimiento atroz. Allá va David Vais, allá va el trentino, absolutamente desatado. Cómo ha corrido, con qué inteligencia, guardando cualquier gramo de fuerza. Le va a llegar a Eurocometa la victoria en la etapa del Gran Sasso.
And finally, we learnt that COVID-19 is still having a major impact on bike racing. And that was no more obvious than when race leader Remco Evenepoel tested positive for coronavirus after stage 9 of the Giro d'Italia. He and his team made the announcement on social media, and Evenepoel will of course leave the race immediately. And we'll go over the last week of stages in more detail shortly, but it has to be said, with the race set so nicely, I'm gutted to see Remco bow out, particularly as he was the owner of the Maglia Rosa and had such an explosive start to the Giro with 2 stage wins over the first 9 stages. I can't help wondering though, could he be heading to the Tour de France instead? There is a chance we'll see a showdown between Tadej Pogacar, Jonas Vingegaard and now Evenepoel in France this July. That's a 3-up battle that will surely come at some point throughout their careers, but could we see it in 2023? Let's not get too ahead of ourselves though. We are of course wishing Evenepoel all the best with his recovery. Evenepoel is not the only rider to have tested positive for COVID-19 over the last week. Filippo Ganna also tested positive and was unable to start stage 8 nor the stage 9 time trial, which would have suited him so well of course. Rigo Oran, Nicola Conchi and Gio Aliotti are among the other riders who have tested positive. So with COVID still floating around the bunch, it's only natural to worry further about how the race could be further impacted by coronavirus. All we can say at the moment is let's hope we've seen the worst of it and we can enjoy the racing with as few riders as possible leaving the race. Anyway, how did we get here? Let's pick up with stage 4 at the Giro d'Italia, the first medium mountain stage of the race and the hardest stage to this point. Evenepoel held the pink jersey and had publicly stated that he hoped to give it away to a non-dangerous GC rider. That meant a frantic start to the day with a long, and I mean long, fight for the breakaway. Ultimately though, a group of 7 went up the road, including Andreas Leknesund, Aurélien Paris-Pentre and Warren Barguil, who was the only previous Grand Tour stage winner in the move. Ultimately, it was Leknesund and Paris-Pentre who were the strongest on the final climb, and with the Norwegian in the better position in the GC, he knew the pink jersey was on the line, especially with Ineos driving on behind. With the duo entering the final kilometre together, Leknesund pressed on to secure the lead of the race, effectively towing Paris-Pentre to the finish, where the Frenchman could enjoy stage honours. It would be double delight for the duo though, with Leknesund securing pink by an eventual margin of 28 seconds, Paris-Pentre himself moving up to 3rd overall. We actually have a section examining Paris-Pentre's career so far on this week's World of Cycling, so make sure you look out for that on GCN+. Anyway, on to stage 5, and we expected a mass sprint in Salerno. But as the riders got underway, it became evident that weather conditions were grim, and that's being kind. Thibaut Pinot was chasing KOM points early and did well to avoid going down here. The stage was marred by crashes though, with Remco Evenepoel hitting the deck and staying down briefly after a stray dog interrupted proceedings. That did not put the tarmac in Evenepoel's rearview mirrors though, and he went down again, much closer to the finish line this time, and luckily he was inside the crucial 3 kilometre to go marker. The stage had been an absolute grueler for many, but we eventually had the expected mass sprint. Mark Cavendish had made it to this point unscathed and looked to be positioned and poised to challenge for the win, before his back wheel skidded on a white line, with the ripple effects of that meaning he crashed and slid across the line, collecting numerous riders too. Caden Groves had avoided all of the carnage though, with the 24-year-old sprinting to stage victory on his Giro d'Italia debut. The Aussie is turning into a fantastic rider, and I think he's in real danger of becoming underrated. He also won at the Vuelta on his Grand Tour debut last year, and now only needs a victory at the Tour de France to complete the sets. And talking of completing the sets, multiple riders had the chance to do just that at the Giro this year, including Simon Clark and Mads Pedersen. He and the other sprinters were eyeing another opportunity in Napoli on stage 6. However, a breakaway of just 5 riders went up the road early to enjoy the stunning scenery on the Amalfi Coast, with Simon Clark and Alessandro De Marchi the headline names there. They were the strongest of the breakaway riders and held a 1-minute lead with 10 kilometres left and still had 30 seconds as they went under the 3-kilometre to go banner. So, the finish was set. Over to Rob Hatch.
350 metres now as they come behind. Clark on the left in the darker jersey. It's the blue and white of De Marchi on the left as we look at it now, and the sprint is launched. 250 metres to go. A top break, they're going to be caught. And there goes Fernando Gaviria. Gaviria at the front being chased on by Consonni. On the left-hand side, they'll try and come around him. There is Milan, 100 metres to go. It's a heart attack sprint here in Napoli. Pedersen's there. Gaviria's caught. And finally, it's Mads Pedersen who completes the Peder Slam.
Mads Pedersen completing the Grand Slam of stage victories then, and the Giro moved on to the highly anticipated Gran Sasso d'Italia for stage 7. The likes of Marco Pantani and Simon Yates have won here previously. But did it live up to the billing this time? No. Well, not in the GC group, with all the favourites coming in together. That meant the chance of a lifetime for Simone Petilli, Karel Vacek and Davide Bias in the breakaway. And it was the Yolo Cometa man who was the strongest at the top of the climb, sprinting to a memorable stage victory. Proof that the breakaway is always worthwhile, and if you don't buy a ticket, you can't win the raffle. Yolo Cometa have made a habit of winning big at the Giro after Lorenzo Fortunato won atop Monte Zoncolan in 2021. Team manager Alberto Contador certainly enjoyed the result from the commentary box. On to stage 8 then, and a stage I've really been looking forward to because it featured the uber steep Cappuccini climb not once, but twice. At 207 kilometres, it would be difficult for the peloton to control. So, it was circled by all of the breakaway specialists. Among them was Ben Healy, and to be honest, it wasn't a fair fight. Healy attacked on the first descent of the Cappuccini and went solo, leaving some very capable riders in his wake. And from there, it was a demonstration. Healy was uncatchable. He has shown how strong he is on the hilly terrain over the past few months, but what's impressed me most is his supreme engine. He just seems to get better as the kilometres tick by, as others fade away. His victory by 1 minute and 49 seconds over Derek G is the biggest winning margin at the Giro since Chris Froome's sensational solo ride in 2018. Thanks to racing nerd Killian Kelly for that one. Healy even got the seal of approval from the breakaway king himself, Thomas de Gendt. It was the old 2 races for the price of 1 though, with the GC battle kicking off behind. Primož Roglič launched early on the climb, with Remco Evenepoel reacting to him. He looked like he was going to close the gap and had him in his sights, but faded towards the top of the climb, with the Ineos duo of Geraint Thomas and Theo Geoghegan-Hart coming over the top and timing their effort perfectly to get to Roglič in time for the descent. It was a gap of around 3 seconds between the Roglič and Evenepoel group at the top of the climb, but that opens up on the descent to 14 seconds by the time they swooped to the finish line. Not quite enough time to sip their post-stage cappuccino, but a handy margin nonetheless for the trio out front. Stage 9 was the final before the first rest day, and the longest time trial of the race, which would surely be crucial in the GC. No Pippo Ganna for this one though, remember. Bauke Mollema set the early benchmark, but then came an intriguing intra-team rivalry between Bruno Armorai and Stefan Kung. The 2 riders traded fastest time splits after setting off a minute apart, with Kung pipping his teammate by just 4 seconds in the end. The GC favourites were next off the start ramp, and the big surprise at the first checkpoint was Primož Roglič, because he was more than 30 seconds behind Evenepoel already. As the TT progressed though, it became clear that Roglič had employed a negative split strategy, ramping up his effort as the time trial went on. Meanwhile, Evenepoel's large lead at the first time split had been cut, and by the final checkpoints, he was tied with both Theo Geoghegan-Hart and Geraint Thomas for the fastest time. Geoghegan Hart was the first of those riders to finish, and he booted Stefan Kung off the hot seat by a single second. Next to finish was Geraint Thomas, who took another single second off the best time. Roglic then finished 16 seconds down on Thomas, and only Remco Evenepoel could deny the Brits his first Giro d'Italia victory. It came down to the final meters, but Evenepoel just did enough to take stage victory, with Andreas Letnesund finishing 20th. All of that meant Evenepoel moved back into the maglia rosa. But as we know by now, he would test positive for COVID-19 and leave the race later that day. Evenepoel is the first GC leader of any Grand Tour to drop out of a race since Tony Martin at the 2015 Tour de France. So, what does all of this mean for the GC? Well, without Evenepoel in the picture, Geraint Thomas is leading the Giro d'Italia by a margin of just 2 seconds, over Primož Roglic with Teo Geoghegan Hart at 5 seconds. Joao Almeida and Andreas Letnesund are still in close proximity, with the likes of Alex Vlasov, Leonard Kemner and Damiano Caruso all in the top 10. A tantalising situation, albeit a sour taste in the mouth with the way Evenepoel was forced to leave the race. So, Geraint in the lead, but will he wear the maglia rosa on stage 10? Well, after consulting the rulebook, it's up to the rider. But looking back to 2007 and 2015 at the Tour de France, Alberto Contador and Chris Froome chose against wearing the leader's jersey on the stage immediately following the race leader's withdrawal. So we'll see how that one plays out very, very soon. However, I'm keen to know how you think the next week of racing will play out, with the race situation suddenly turned completely on its head. Will Ineos control things? As well as having Geraint and Teo in the top 3, they have 3 other riders in the top 15, so plenty of cards to play for them. Or will Roglic come out firing again? Or perhaps we'll see the likes of UAE, Bora or Bahrain use their numerous leaders to their advantage. And for Soudal Quickstep, I think they'll be uber aggressive in trying to win from the breakaway in the days to come. And they have plenty of strong options as well, with the likes of Ilan van Wilder, Jan Hurt and Louis Vavaka all in play. A quick word for Stefan Kung before moving on, by the way, who always seems to miss out by the narrowest of margins. He was just 4 seconds off Evenepoel's winning time in the time trial and somehow ended off the podium.
Can I say? The impression, it's the story of my life, always missing out closely. Dried up in the end for the GC contender, so that for sure didn't help. But nevertheless, it's an outdoor sport, so I don't blame it on anything. Just wasn't enough once again, but yeah, it's really frustrating. I mean, like several times that it's always so close. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Of course, the Giro d'Italia is far from the only racing we've had over the past week. The Itzulia Women's Tour has also taken place, and I was particularly looking forward to this one after the huge showdown between Demi Vollering and Annemiek van Vleuten at the Vuelta last week. And despite finishing runner-up there, Vollering would start full of confidence after winning all 3 stages here last year. And she wasn't in any mood to change her 100% record at the race on stage 1. Vollering went clear and was the class of the field, soloing to a fine stage win, putting her in pole position in the GC. It was an SD Works 1-2 as well, with Marlon Ruser finishing second at 47 seconds, just ahead of Kasia Niewiadoma, Annemiek van Vleuten and Olivia Barrel. Stage 2 then, and the Lezama climb with 6 kilometers left was the point to watch. And Niewiadoma displayed her fine form again with a ferocious attack, and only Vollering was able to initially follow from the group of favourites. A larger group of riders clawed their way back though, meaning the stage would be decided in a reduced sprint. And guess what? It was another show of dominance from Vollering, winning for the 2nd day in a row, extending her race lead, meaning she'd now won 5 out of 5 stages at this race in her career. So, Vollering was set to win overall, but could she complete the hat-trick of stage victories for the 2nd year in a row? Well, no she couldn't, but it wasn't really due to her lack of strength. Instead, her teammate and long-range specialist Marlon Reusser had set off up the roads. And if the peloton hadn't learnt by now, you simply cannot afford to give Reusser any type of lead whatsoever. The Swiss romped to stage victory and won by more than 2.5 minutes to also secure the overall race victory. The chasers were willing to track stand within the final kilometre, but Vollering sprinted to second place on the stage, losing her 100% record in the process. But if she was going to lose that specific title, losing it to her teammate certainly isn't a bad way to do it. Complete dominance from SD Worx again. They're having some year, aren't they? The Navarra Women's Elite Classic also took place earlier last week. Rihanna Marcus won by a whopping 47 seconds for Jumbo-Visma. She's shown great form of late, taking fourth at Liège-Bastogne-Liège as well as in the GC at La Vuelta Femenina. So great to see her take her first road victory of the season. The Tour of Hungary has also taken place this week. Stage 1 was a sprinter stage and was closely contested with Dylan Groenewegen defeating Sam Bennett and the fast-finishing Caleb Ewan. Egan Bernal also was involved in a crash again. He's been so unlucky this season, getting involved in numerous incidents. So I was relieved to see him continuing the race, unlike his teammate Luke Plapp, who suffered from a concussion. After he wasn't involved in the Stage 1 showdown, Fabio Jakobsen came to the fore with some huge power to win Stage 2 ahead of Phil Bauhaus, with a strong result from Vito Bratt in third. Stage 3 was the first chance for the climbers, and Mark Hirschi showed some of his best form. He beat British duo Ben Tullett and Max Poole, with Egan Bernal among the chasing group at 12 seconds. The longest summit finish of the race was next, and this time, Yannis Voissard escaped the group to take a big win for Tudor Pro Cycling. Voissard has been riding well all year with some consistent results across the board, so good to see him take his first pro victory. Thibaut Nice also delivered surely the best climbing performance of his young career so far, with second place on the day. Mark Hirschi retained the race lead though, with Tullett holding second and Voissard rising to third ahead of the final stage in Budapest. However, the stage was neutralised due to treacherous weather conditions, effectively giving Hirschi the first stage race victory of his career to date. Last week, we were talking about Greg van Avermaet after he announced that he'll retire at the end of the season, but the Belgian simply can't stay out the headlines. He won Boucles de l'Orne in a sprint ahead of Florian Vermeersch in second. Great to see Van Avermaet pick up another win, albeit not the biggest of his career, before he turns 38 years of age this week. Adding to all of that, we've had the first round of the Mountain Bike World Cup in Novo Mesto. The stars were out with the likes of Tom Paycock, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot and Puck Pieterse all in action, and some nail-biting finishes too. Be sure to tune in to the GMBN Racing News Show to see what happened there. So, what do we have coming up for you on GCN Plus this week? The Giro d'Italia of course continues with daily coverage. Rob Hatch and Sean the King Kelly are on hand to guide you through the action, while Orla and the gang will be bringing you pre- and post-race coverage on the breakaway. There are some great stages this week too, with stage 13 on Friday the highlight for me. That one finishes atop Crans Montana, also featuring the Cima Coppi, or the highest point of the race, at the Col de Grand Saint Bernard. But stage 15 on Sunday isn't one to be ignored either. Lots of climbing all day long means we should have some fiery action before finishing in Bergamo. Don't forget to tune into this week's World of Cycling to get your extra Giro fix too. Cy Richardson will be in this chair right here actually to talk things over with Rob Hatch and Sean Kelly, and I cannot wait to hear what they have to say. We'll also have the 4 days of Dunkirk. The first of 6 stages there are on Tuesday, with the race concluding on Sunday. Starting on Thursday, we'll have the Vuelta a Burgos Feminas. That one finishes on Sunday, where the riders will climb the revered Lagunas di Niella, a grueling climb which will surely play its part in deciding the overall winner. And look out for the Circuit de Walney on Thursday, the 18th of May. Veenendaal on Saturday, the 20th. Dylan Groenewegen won there last year, as well as the Antwerp Port Epic, which is on Sunday. And the good news is there isn't a single territory restriction on our races this week. Wherever you subscribe to GCN Plus, you'll be able to watch all of those races live or on demand, including the Giro d'Italia. And this week's documentary is the latest in our Heartland series, and this time we're in southern France and the Côte d'Azur. Take a look.
I'm a 2-time downhill mountain bike world champion and 5-time World Cup winner. Having lived here my whole life, I've been lucky growing up riding trails like this. For me, the Côte d'Azur has some of the most exciting riding in the world.
why wouldn't you want to live here? It's incredible. It's the best roads, the best training I've ever been on.
When the teams are telling me, oh, we're going on training camp, it's like, well, come here in a training camp. I was probably one of the few riders that was downgrading my quality of training because I was going somewhere else.
You know, there is not many places when you have like 1,000-meter high mountain basically dive into the sea.
And some contract news now. Olav Koy will not be a Jumbo-Visma rider next season. The news doesn't come as a great surprise to me though, to be honest, despite some fantastic performances from Koy this year, including a stage victory at Paris-Nice. Koy was unable to force his way into the Giro d'Italia lineup. So, where will he be next season? Let me know which team you think he should move to in the comments below. Right, that's all we have time for this week. Enjoy your racing and see you at the same time on next week's show.